Welcome to Primary Sources. Today we'll talk to local author Michael Bolinger about his science fiction novel, The Dachshund. Incredible cover art there. Hope you can see it. You could also see it behind Michael's shoulders. And I have a couple of, actually 10, 11 questions about this book. It's pretty intriguing, but the first will be your motivation as a writer. Have you always wanted to be a writer, or did the idea for this book inspire you to write?
Well, I've always enjoyed writing, but I haven't always wanted to be a writer or considered myself a writer. I actually started writing in my teens. I was writing poems and song lyrics, that sort of thing. Like I said, I never really considered myself a serious writer, probably until my 30s when I began writing technical documents and that sort of thing. But even after that, it took me another 2 decades to realize that there was a serious science fiction writer locked up inside just wanting to get out. So in my 50s, I started dabbling with short stories. And one day while thinking of topics for short stories, I remembered this this story that my mother had told me back when I was 20 years old, I guess. And it was kind of a sober story. It was about this tragic incident that happened to an infant. And it was so shocking to me that it stayed with me all these years. So anyway, I was looking for topics for short stories, and I thought that might be something worthwhile to write about. But then it was another several years before I actually got around to it because of other writing priorities, you know. But then one day I was thinking about it, and I realized I could actually mix a science fiction element in with this. And that's when I began actually writing in earnest that short story. So the original intent for the Dachshund, it didn't even have that name at that time, was to be a short story. If you look at chapter 1 in the book, that's basically the short story. I never intended for it to be published or anything like that. But over the course of the next several months, I read it and I reread it, and I really liked what was there, but I had this feeling like there's something missing. And then one day when I read it, I realized what was missing, and what was missing was the rest of the story. You know, what happens to this infant who had this tragic incident? What happens when this infant grows up? When did he discover that he had these superpowers, and how did that realization affect him and his relationship with other people? So that's kind of the backstory there for how that came about.
Wow. So never underestimate a short story. it'll blossom into a wonderful.
Right. It did blossom.
And the first chapter kind of had that feel, like it was how should I it had a more realistic feel, less science fiction feel, but then until you start piecing the pieces together.
Laying the groundwork there.
And so you told us a little bit about how the idea came to you. Did it sort of build over time from short story to novel, or did you have an aha moment like this has to be a novel?
Well, so the answer is both. Because I actually had 2 aha moments, and then I had this slow build. So the backstory is, you know, my mother told me that story, and it developed into a short story. And then I had that. So the first aha moment was when I realized I could mix a science fiction element into it. The second aha moment was when I realized that I needed to tell the rest of the story. And that's where the slow build kind of came into play. The characteristics of his superpower didn't come to me all at once. It was kind of a slow build over time. And growing up, I had read all these, DC and Marvel comic books, and I was familiar with all of the old superheroes and their powers and all this. So I wanted to create a character that had a very unique set of superpowers. I spent a lot of time crafting his superpowers to be unlike anything that I had ever experienced, read about in my years, because I knew that it was going to be very pivotal to the success of the book. And then during the narrative arc, I did kind of a slow reveal on those superpowers, because he doesn't discover them all at one time. There's several facets to them, and he only discovers bits and pieces here and there. So that's the building over time and the slow reveal.
And his science teacher helps him come into his shoes and helps him learn about his powers, or they kind of discover it together. And I really enjoyed that angle in it.
Yes, they did. Yes, the science teacher really helped him out.
So could you give us a brief synopsis of the novel? I mean, I've read it, but most of our viewers haven't. So just to give them a taste for what it's about.
Yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this little blurb that I've prepared for social media.
Okay.
It does a superb job.
Absolutely.
So this sci-fi novel weaves a masterful spellbinding tale. It's set during the Cold War period of geopolitical tension between the Soviet Union and the United States. The Dachshund propels the reader through a shadowy world of government corruption, covert operations, and espionage. As the story opens, Johnny Churchill is an infant in the mid-1950s who experiences an unthinkable evil. By the late 1960s, he's become a nerdy teen who inadvertently discovers he has these incredible supernatural abilities. And to help him better understand his amazing powers, he's given this ancient manuscript written by a distant family relative who allegedly lived 930 years ago. So with the aid of his science teacher, as you mentioned, Johnny spends several years studying this mysterious manuscript and the underlying science behind his uncanny gifts. When security video captures his incredible exploits in action, he catches the attention of both the US and the Soviet governments, who separately send black ops teams either to capture or neutralize him. And discovering that they can do neither, they brutally kidnap members of his family and attempt to force him to steal nuclear secrets from the opposing government. So determined to rescue his family and bring the criminal masterminds to justice, hopefully without triggering World War III, Johnny launches into a frantic search across two continents, pitting his superpowers against the world's two largest government superpowers.
Awesome. There's
a little bit of action there.
Just a little bit. Lots of collarbones breaking and lovely explosions throughout.
Yeah.
So there's a sizable historical element I've noticed when I was reading the Dachshund, from Soviet labor camps, intelligence agencies, even American Revolutionary era. And I wonder, how much research did you put into all of this? Or were you just naturally a history buff and you kind of weaved it all together? Or
So yes, there is a sizable amount of history involved in it, but no, I am not a history buff. There's a lot of research that actually went into doing the Dachshund. It's set in mid-America in the 20th century during the Cold War era, as I mentioned, and that happens to be when and where I grew up. So certain aspects in the book come from my life experiences, of course. But besides being occurring in North America, it also spans two continents, Europe and Asia. There's, I want to say, 4 chapters that's actually occurring in the old Soviet Union. So I did a lot of research on US and Soviet intelligence agencies, as well as Soviet geography and just Soviet society in general. I had no foreknowledge, no prior knowledge of any of that. And then for the historical elements, I wanted to, I had this idea. I wanted to include some mysteries from history, not just any kind of history, but specific historical events that had some unexplained details associated with it. Okay, so I did some research. I found 2 really good fits for the dachshund. Like I said, I'm not a history buff, so I need to refer to paper here with the dates and facts and figures. But in November 1780, there was this British frigate, the HMS Hussar, that sank in treacherous waters of Hell's Gate, which is located between Randall's Island and Astoria, Queens on Long Island, New York. Perhaps some of our listeners know exactly where that's at. It was rumored to have $2 to $4 million in gold aboard for British payroll, and that was valuation back in 1780. Although the British denied there was any gold aboard, there were many salvage efforts that took place over the next 150 years. So there were people that believed that there was definitely gold aboard there. Now, in real life, the gold was never found. That's the mystery that's associated with it. But there is an episode in the Dachshund that explains exactly what happened to that gold. So we have sunken treasure. And then the second historical mystery occurred on the night of April 7th of 1862, following the Battle of Shiloh. And some history buffs will know that that was during the Civil War. Anyway, during the battle, over 200,000 people were casualties were amassed between the two sides. And the mystery is that some of the men noticed that their open wounds began to glow in the dark. It displayed a greenish blue hue. And doctors at that time had noted, and this is documented in history, that soldiers whose wounds had this strange emission of light seemed to fare better than soldiers whose wounds didn't glow.
Johnny's healing power, or
Yeah.
his family member's healing power that passed it on to him.
Yeah. So the phenomenon at that time was referred to as angel's glow. That's what both sides of the conflict came to call it. Anyway, there's an episode in the Dachshund that's actually set during the Civil War era that explains the mystery of that medical incident.
It's awesome. So I've noticed, I mean, ultimately, I think it's a science fiction novel, but I feel like there's a fair bit of genre hopping, and that's what kept me glued to the book. The beginning part, it was very realistic. You have Johnny's bullies, this kind of day in the life of a kid trying to fit in. He's exceedingly smart. And then toward the middle of the book, it takes this speculative historical fiction turn when they're reading his family members' journals, trying to figure out, where is all of this true about Johnny and his powers. And then there's like, mid-20th century espionage intrigue with Soviets and the FBI and the CIA. And I loved it. So I want to ask you also about your characters. I'm thinking of even Johnny's bullies, even some of the secondary characters were well done. And I think of the traitorous lieutenant. I think of Johnny's teacher and mentor, Mr. Z. How did you develop your characters? Did you just kind of map them out on paper and try to brainstorm traits, or how did you go about it?
So that's a good question. I'm glad you asked that. I think that great character development involves giving a deep-seated drive to a character to accomplish an objective, and then kind of sprinkling in, objective or roadblocks, that sort of thing, and then creating tension, creating conflict. Because without the obstacles, there can't really be a finish line, and the story just kind of rambles. And without tension, without conflict, there can't be any resolution. And so you don't really know what was I trying to say? Without conflict, you don't know the story kind of comes off as unrealistic or boring. Okay, so another thing is I created this massive backstory for the main characters, more information than would ever appear in the actual book, and I did that because I wanted to know these characters on a personal basis, not just on a paper basis. I wanted them to be like real people. I wanted to be able to crawl into their minds and be able to see their world through their eyes. I wanted to know what they would think, or what they would do, or what they would say in any given situation. It's a lot like play acting, where you actually become that character in that scene. And it helps to understand them. So anyway, that's how I did it. I even got to the point where I would have conversations with the characters. I'd ask them questions and that sort of thing. So you've heard the term writer's block?
Yes.
Well, so for me, writer's block is when my fictional characters won't talk to me. And
I like that.
And insomnia is when my fictional characters won't shut up. So anyway, you asked about or you mentioned Mr. Zumwalt. He's great, isn't he?
Yeah.
Mr. Zumwalt is Johnny's science teacher, who observes in class one day an unintended display of his superpower. And as a result, rather than freaking out, or rather than doing, a lot of other things, he chooses to take Johnny under his wing and help him study these powers, study the science behind these powers. I think that, everybody deserves a Mr. Zumwalt in their life. I had one, several actually. I based his character on a couple of really great teachers that I had growing up. And as the narrative arc continued, anytime I would deal with Mr. Zumwalt, I saw these teachers of mine. And I have to admit that early on, I was kind of on the fence with Mr. Zumwalt. I didn't know if he was going to be, a wolf in sheep's clothing, but in the end, I held true to both the nature and the memory of those teachers.
Yeah, I liked that. He was a very honest, authentic character amidst, all of the people in the American intelligence and Russian intelligence that are trying to stab him in the back. So you mentioned writer's block when your characters stop talking to you. Can you tell us a little about your writing process for this book? What was it like? Did you have a routine, or did you just write when inspired? Or if you could tell us a little about your writing process.
Sure. so my writing process, I I my writing process was uh, fairly loose. I did have a writing process, but it wasn't, cast in stone. Um, so so one thing is, I have a full-time day job, for example. Um, so I'm only available to write on nights and weekends. But it's not necessarily every night and every weekend, because I have, other responsibilities as well. So there's, that's the when I'm able to write. The where is, I generally write like in the living room or the kitchen, because those are the rooms with the most comfortable chairs. But I'm not rigid about it. I've probably written in every room in the house. I do it on my laptop, and I'll just, wherever I need to be, I'll carry my laptop. I've even, written out on the back patio. So, um, and when I write, another routine is I don't like there to be distractions, because I like to focus 100% of my mental capacity on the writing. So I don't have the TV playing in the background. I don't have music playing. I don't do texting and that sort of thing when I'm writing. If I do these other things, I'll take a break from writing,
Yeah.
So, and then when I come back, I can focus on it. I like to avoid the distractions. Now, the inspiration is kind of a quirky thing, I think. Kind of like Johnny's superpowers, because you never know when and where it's going to hit you. You never know what's going to spark it. So, ideally, you're inspired when you sit down to write, but that's not always the case. I've been inspired in other places. I've, while eating a meal, or while driving in the car, or even in the restroom. I've even woke up in the night with this really great idea, and so I'll just jot it down, on the bedside notepad. But for those times when I do sit down, if I and generally I'm inspired when I sit down, but if I'm not, then those are the times that I actually do the research. And I do that by like Googling the different topics and so forth. And then I'll make notes as I'm doing the research. And eventually the notes get transcribed, and the bedside notes get transcribed into the manuscript. And I guess that kind of brings into play when I write, I actually use 3 different colors of text. And so I use black, red, and blue. And the black indicates that the text is in final draft format. It means that I've proofread it, that I'm satisfied with it. It doesn't need any additional work, at least at that moment. The red text is like the text that's the work in progress. It's stuff that I know needs some additional work, some additional attention. And then once I'm satisfied with it, I'll change its color to black. The third color is blue, and blue text is generally like if I copy paste a URL from the internet, or any text that I'm not the author is in blue text. And it's generally just there for reference, and will eventually be deleted. All blue text gets deleted, at the end of the day. So.
Okay, so did you continuously proofread and edit your work, or did you proofread and edit like in big chunks, or?
That's a good question too. I would, as long as I was being inspired and writing, the flow was there, I'd write. If it slowed down, or I didn't feel inspired, and I was tired of researching, then I would edit. I would go back and read what I had written, and that sort of thing.
That's really inspiring to hear, because I struggle with inspiration a lot of the time, and I know a lot of writers and poets do. But when you aren't inspired, you can still get things done. You can still work and research, and
Absolutely.
so I just want to comment on how well plotted and the novel is, and the tension just builds and builds, and there's never a dull moment. And I was wondering if you sort of like on a big dry erase board or with a bunch of index cards, did you plot this out, or how was your how did you plot this?
So I started with the main idea. This kid with supernatural powers that had a horrible incident, and I broke it into segments, and each segment was a challenge and how he faced that challenge. So, for example, as I was breaking it down, I crawled into his mind and I said, okay, what does a kid want? And I realized that, a kid with supernatural powers wants what any other kid wants. He wants to be loved and accepted. He wants to have friends, and he wants to fit in and that sort of thing.
He wants a muscle car.
Yeah.
I like that.
He wants a muscle car.
Yeah.
But I also so a kid with superpowers isn't necessarily unlike, say, a kid with a birth defect or a kid with a learning disability, because those kind of kids aren't always seen as fitting in by their peers. And so that was one of Johnny's first obstacles, was fitting in. And so as the plot developed, I created these I guess must-haves, if you want to call them that. I knew that I wanted to include a historical element. I knew I wanted to include a love story as a subplot. I knew I wanted to include international intrigue and that sort of thing. So I compiled this list of all the must-haves, and then I just started weaving them together. So for the historical element, I had to create this character that was alive back when these historical events took place, and then I had to create this mysterious manuscript so that the information about these historical events, were captured and then handed down over time and found their way into Johnny's hands. And then to capture the love story subplot, I created scenes that displayed the role that his superpower played in the relationship, or the role that it didn't play, as the case may be. And then for the international intrigue, I created scenes that showed how the US and the Russian governments initially discovered that Johnny had superpowers, and then the extreme lengths that they went to in competition with one another to gain control of him. And that's kind of how the plot developed and how I got all those elements into it.
Wow. Well, you did it seamlessly. I mean, it reads very seamlessly. Let's talk a little bit about the cover art. My coworker was just instantly intrigued by the cover when I was reading it at work. Did you design it yourself, or did you collaborate with someone or commission someone to do it?
So thank you. I'm really pleased with the cover art. And the story there is, as I was writing the novel, I knew that that I needed, a compelling image, that captured the whole story. But I'm not particularly gifted in that area, so I started looking for some alternatives. And I had this friend that has self-published several books, actually, and he referred me to a company that specializes in book cover art, and I contacted them. Now, they've done thousands of book covers, including a lot of them that for books that appeared on the New York Times and the USA Today bestseller lists. And it turned out that the process was pretty smooth, actually. They asked me for a synopsis of the book, along with key elements in the book, like important places, themes in the book, symbols, that sort of thing. So I gave them all that information, but I still didn't have a specific image in mind. So based on the input I gave them, they came back with these two images for me to review, and one of them instantly appealed to me. And so we did a couple of rounds of tweaking on the image, and the results are what you see on the cover today. Johnny Churchill, he's leaping off the edge of a building, that portrays the action that goes on in the book. And his part of his leg obscures the title, and it gives the illusion that he's actually jumping off the page at you. Yeah, and yeah, that's it. Yeah, and then he's got these special effects going on around his hands, and that
His
of course
energy
depicts,
fields, yeah.
Yeah, that depicts his superpowers. And then there's an image of the Pentagon going on in the background. And that, of course, depicts, the U.S. military and intelligence agencies, which are so key to the plot. So that's basically it.
Oh, so you mentioned a friend who was involved with self-publishing told you about this,
Yes.
the illustrating company. So could you tell us about your self-publishing experience with the Dachshund? Were there any challenges in self-publishing this, and what advice would you give new authors in regard to this process?
So yes, there were challenges. There are challenges to self-publishing. And in a nutshell, the challenges are you wear all the hats. You're responsible for generating an audience. You're responsible for all the marketing. You're responsible for all of the advertising. You're responsible for all the financing and those types of things. Where if you had gone through, say, a traditional publishing house, they do all of that. So here I am, a self-published author, and but I'm also writing a sequel to this book. So the problem is that there's only 24 hours in a day, right? So every hour that I spend marketing the Dachshund is an hour that I can't spend writing the sequel, and vice versa. So all these you're juggling all these balls at a time. So the advice that I would give to anybody that's considering self-publishing is do your research first. Know exactly what it is you're getting yourself into and what will be expected of you as an indie author. If you do decide to be an indie author, by all means, go into it with your eyes wide open. And if you do, there's a lot of resources, free resources that are available to indie authors. There's websites, there's YouTube videos, there's Facebook groups, there's indie author blogs and different forums and stuff. So definitely avail yourself of all of those if that's the route that you choose.
So I can see the Dachshund appealing to both savvy teen sci-fi readers because of Johnny's age, but I can also see it appealing to seasoned adult sci-fi buffs and speculative fiction buffs. Did you have a particular market in mind when you were writing this, or did you just write it and analyze your what market afterward?
So yes, I did have a specific market in mind, and that was the adult sci-fi market. But having said that, the Dachshund has done well with both the young adult and the adult sci-fi markets. I think that the quirky superpowers of Johnny and the nerdy antics appeal to the younger readers, where the history and the spy, espionage, all that would appeal more to the older readers. Now I've received feedback from people from their teens all the way to this gentleman that was 90 years old that read the book, and it's all been positive feedback. So I think it appeals to a wide variety of ages, even though the attendant market is the adult. It also appeals to male and female. I've had a lot of men and women read the book. And in this one case, there's a retired English teacher, high school English teacher, who admittedly stays away from science fiction, read the book, and provided feedback on it. And so her comments were that she especially enjoyed the writing voice that the book had. So
you've won over stodgy English teachers. That's impressive.
Not all English teachers are stodgy, but yeah.
Shakespeare and Chaucer day in and day out, and then the Dachshund.
And the Dachshund.
Excellent. So where can viewers get their hands on this book, aside from the library? Where can they purchase a copy of the Dachshund?
Okay, so yes, the Dachshund is available on Amazon. Just go out to Amazon and search for my name, Michael Bolinger, and it'll pull it right up.
Awesome. And when can we expect the sequel?
Well, at this point in time, the sequel, I would guesstimate, is probably 50% finished. So given that I only write on nights and weekends, I don't know, maybe within a year.
Okay, awesome. And I hope you implied at the end of this one, but I hope Johnny and Angela kind of hit it off. And I mean, they were hitting it off, but he couldn't make up his mind whether he wanted to commit or not. I hope he commits. Yes. She seems like a good girl.
No spoilers here.
Well, I guess viewers will just have to read it for themselves then.
Yep.
When it's released. So I had a lot of fun, Michael. Thank you so much for talking to us about your book.
And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Looking forward to the next one.
All right then. Bye now.
Bye.